Hi everybody, my name is Happy Kambule and this is another edition of 10-Minute Happy Hour. This is the first edition after the elections of the South African president and the parliamentary and the legislatures. Basically what we do know now is that we've got all the members of parliament sitting and making laws, and we know who is running the country, including his team. This is the person which we will call Cyril Ramaphosa, or CR17 or CR19. So today we're going to deep dive into the different departments. Some of the decisions that Cyril Ramaphosa has taken is to split up some departments and to merge some departments. Other things that he has done is also elect or select who's going to be running those departments. We will look at each of those people, particularly the Environment Department as well as the Energy Department. I'm not going to spoil anything by telling you what really happened to them, but we'll have to go through the show to understand what really happened. So what happened to the Department of Environmental Affairs? What happened to the Department of Environmental Affairs is that it is now merged with Fisheries and Forestry, which basically means that the Department of Environmental Affairs has three other functionaries and three other mandates that it needs to work with. Traditionally, Forestry and Fisheries used to be with agriculture, and they were a different department altogether which would deal also with rural reform. But now what this means is that the Department of Environmental Affairs now has a more interconnected ideology as well as an institutional arrangement around issues of environment. So when we're talking about issues of pollution, we're no longer talking about terrestrial, we're also talking about marine as well as air pollution. When we're talking about climate change, we're talking about all other sources that would come from the ocean, land, as well as the skies. So basically, it means that when you are raising an issue, the department will start to employ a mandate looked at by three different other functionaries. So not only is it an issue of land, it is also an issue of marine as well as air. So who's running the Department of Environmental Affairs? Her name is Barbara Creecy. Very hard to pronounce for my tongue. Barbara Creecy is a former MEC of Finance in Gauteng, and basically she is very good at the bureaucratic and technocratic processes of government. She's good at policy formulation and has garnered big support for her ability to be a good bureaucrat. There is a slight problem, of course, in terms of the work that we do, or if you want to change her mind about a particular thing. If you want to change her mind, it might be hard, but if you do eventually do it in the right way, following due process and readily identified platforms, I think that it will go a long way in making sure that your idea or your concept is actually followed through in national government. The second department that we'll be looking at is the Department of Mineral and Energy. It used to be the same department in 2010, but after the 2014-2015 elections, as you might know, they were split apart, and it was mineral resources separate from energy. But now they're back together again. What this basically means is that the mineral energy complex that South Africa has right now will be further entrenched and further enhanced, meaning that mining and energy are put together again, and the mineral beneficiation process that has prevailed over the years is going to keep on going and keep on churning on. The Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy is Gwede Mantashe. Gwede Samson Mantashe, or Uncle Gwede, as most people know him. Uncle Gwede basically is in love with mining. In the previous administration, Gwede Mantashe was the person who took the community of Kolobedi to court over their refusal to allow mining in their community. He's a big fan of mining and he's a big fan of dirty coal. But we understand that because of the dynamics that are happening worldwide as well as in South Africa, that might be a hard thing to push through. What do we expect from the new ministers? What we expect from them, particularly on climate protection, is that the first thing that needs to happen is a determination, an announcement, a pronouncement, some form of official communication that declares South Africa is in a climate emergency. Basically, this means that either the legislature or any member of the executive, including the administration, says to the world that South Africa is undergoing such drastic changes that we are in an emergency. Secondly, we need to align our national determined contributions to the 1.5 Paris Agreement, meaning that we need to update it next year in 2020 and communicate that in COP26. The third thing under climate protection that we need from these guys is that we need to reduce our emissions by no later by 2025, meaning that they peak at that rate and they start to decline drastically thereafter up to 2050. That means that by 2050 we should have zero emissions, no emissions from electricity nor from liquid fuels. It might be a tall ask, but it is possible because technically we've got the technology and the know-how. Concerning the just transition, South Africa needs to finalize, gazette, and publish its integrated resource plan. The integrated resource plan is South Africa's electricity plan concerning what we can build, basically when, how, and why. And secondly, on the just transition and the electricity plan is that they need to be married together, which means by 2030 we have to halve our entire carbon emissions from the electricity sector. By 2040, of course, it would mean that we absolutely remove all carbon emissions from our electricity sector and we premise the entire system on renewable energy. At the end of the day, the bottom line is that there will be no new coal and no new coal should be built. A just transition process needs to be developed by the South African government, but that just transition process needs to be run by trade unions or vice versa. But what we need is a collaborative approach which leads up to a negotiated process where certain targets and commitments are undertaken under the just transition ambit. So let's take a step back. What is a just transition? A just transition is a process where one sector which is vulnerable to certain changes is then taken care of, particularly when we're talking about workers and those who are benefiting from that sector, into a new developing industry or sector. For example, here in South Africa, we've got the coal sector, which is a dominant employer, but we also have an emerging sector, which is the renewable energy sector and the energy efficiency sector as well. But we'll focus on the renewable energy sector. So when workers, as well as people who are indirectly benefiting from the coal industry, are starting to lose their jobs as well as their benefits, they should then be able to be invited as well as accepted, accommodated within the renewable and energy efficiency sector. This does not mean that new employment will not happen. It just means that there is a negotiated process in terms of jobs makeup as well as employment factors into the new sector. These are the types of things that we'll be discussing in a just transition, not only looking at old jobs, but also looking at new jobs and new entries. For the just transition to really work and the opportunities to be really realized, what we need to have is all the barriers to renewable energy removed. That means the technical, economic, as well as the political barriers be removed and see that the industry starts to work as it should, unconstrained. On air pollution, what we need to remember is that big industries, Sasol and Eskom included, have already been given postponements. So no new postponements should be given to them for minimum emission standards. They need to comply with those standards and none of those standards need to be increased in order to facilitate compliance. Secondly, Mpumalanga, Joburg, as well as Pretoria need to have a plan developed for them because these are priority hotspots. When it comes to water, our president, parliament, all departments need to make decision-making premised on water, meaning that the center of all decision-making, the priorities of all decision-making is around safeguarding our scarce resource, water. No department should make a decision that will put our scarce resource, water, at risk. And as we know, we are highly susceptible to water scarcity. Oceans. The government needs to support a call that 30% of all oceans need to be protected by 2030. This basically means that 30% of all oceans will be protected. And that's really a small amount concerning what could actually be happening. Which means by 2020 there will be a treaty that will be signed and South Africa will sign and then ratify it in order to make sure that the portion of ocean that we are undertaking to protect will be protected. And currently South Africa has increased its protected areas to 5%. Just a recap. Today we looked at who's going to be running the new departments, which departments were merged into what kind of department, as well as what we expect from them. In the next episodes, you can expect us to be looking at very, very topical issues, politically topical issues, such as environmental spotlights, COP25, or the integrated resource plan, and any other issues that might be bubbling up, like the sentiment around the carbon tax. Remember to keep us informed of what you would like us to cover as well as what you think of the show. Do not forget to hit that notification button and to subscribe to our show. This has been the 10 Minute Happy Hour, and finally it's below 10 minutes, and see you next time.